The Whispers Under the Floor. Chapter 1: The House on Hemlock Road. Eliza Beckett had never wanted to move. Her old house had been ordinary and warm. This new one, not so much. The car crunched to a stop at the top of a gravel driveway. Hemlock trees lined the property like sentries, tall, dark, and silent. The house beyond them sat crookedly, as if trying to lean away from something. "Well," her father said, unbuckling his seatbelt. "Looks even better in person." Eliza narrowed her eyes. Better wasn't quite the word. The house had a weathered look, its boards warped and gray, its roof patched like an old quilt. Ivy strangled one side. Every window reflected gray sky and darker thoughts. Her mom turned and smiled from the front seat. "Try to keep an open mind, honey. This is a fresh start." Eliza nodded, though her fingers were still clenched in her lap. She didn't want a fresh start. She wanted her friends, her school, her old room with the posters and fairy lights. Not this. The moment she stepped outside, she could smell the mold and rain and something else, something faintly metallic, like blood on coins. The air was cool and carried a sound, a distant rustle that seemed to come from beneath the porch. She paused at the steps. "Eliza," her father called, already hauling boxes to the front door. "Come on, help us out." She forced herself forward. The inside was worse. The floor groaned with every step, and some rooms seemed slightly tilted. It smelled like old fabric and damp wood. The wallpaper in the hallway peeled in long strips, exposing dry rot underneath. Her room was at the end of the second floor. The door stuck when she tried to open it. "You've got to lean into it," her mom said, pushing hard with her shoulder until it gave way. The room was long, narrow, and dim. Only one window faced the forest out back. Across the far wall, the wooden floor was darker than the rest, like something had spilled there and soaked in deep. "There's character," her mom offered. Eliza didn't reply. That night, after pizza and unpacking and her dad cursing at the busted water heater, Eliza lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Wind whispered through the trees outside. Her new bed creaked whenever she moved. Around midnight, the house went still. That's when she heard it. A faint sound beneath her. It wasn't footsteps. It wasn't a rat. It was a dragging sound, like someone pulling something heavy across the floorboards, but from underneath her. Eliza sat up slowly. Her bed was in the center of the room. The sound came from near the wall, by the darker section of the floor. She leaned over the edge of the bed, heart thudding. It stopped. She told her parents at breakfast. Her dad looked up from his coffee. "Probably just the house settling. It's over 100 years old, you know." Her mom smiled gently. "Old homes make all sorts of noises. Pipes, wind, critters." Eliza stabbed her pancake. This wasn't pipes. The second night was worse. She heard the sound again, scraping, dragging. Then a pause. Then again. This time, it was closer. She felt it more than heard it, like the vibration of something large shifting just below the surface. She didn't sleep. At school, she could barely stay awake. She scribbled the sound in her notebook: drag, pause, drag. No one at school talked to her. New kid, quiet, weird. The usual. The third night brought whispers. She awoke at 3:17 a.m. to a soft voice, muffled and close. Not in her head, real. She sat up fast. The whisper stopped. She stared at the wall. The sound had come from directly below that dark section of floor. She crept out of bed and tiptoed over. Knelt. Pressed her ear to the wood. Nothing. Just silence. Then, "Let me out." The words were faint, like someone speaking through cloth. But she heard them. She scrambled backward and didn't sleep again. On Saturday, she examined the floor more closely. She tapped it with a pencil. Most of it sounded solid. But near the wall, where the wood darkened, it echoed. Hollow. She told her parents again. Her dad sighed. Look, I'll check under the house tomorrow. It's probably raccoons or possums. They don't talk, Eliza snapped. Here is the continuation of chapter 1. Her mom rubbed her back. Sweetheart, this move's been hard. Maybe it's stress. New surroundings can do strange things to your brain. I know what I heard, she whispered. That night, she stayed awake with her flashlight. The battery flickered, dimming and buzzing faintly. At 2:43 a.m., the dragging started again. This time, it was followed by a thud, like something bumping the bottom of the floorboards. Then, scratching. A slow, steady scrape like nails or claws. Then the whisper returned. Closer now. Right beneath her. Let me out, Eliza. She clutched her blanket and whispered back without meaning to. Who are you? There was a pause. Down here, waiting. The next morning, Eliza barely touched her cereal. You look like you saw a ghost, her father muttered. She didn't speak. After breakfast, her dad actually kept his word and crawled under the house. He came back an hour later covered in dust and cobwebs. Nothing but dirt and old pipes, he said. No animals. No holes. Nothing. But Eliza noticed something when he brushed past her. He smelled like rust. And old, wet iron. Blood. As she climbed the stairs to her room that night, she saw something strange, a scratch on the hallway wall, low and jagged, just above the baseboard. It hadn't been there before. She stared at it for a long moment before heading to bed. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat by the wall, flashlight in hand, listening. And at 3:07 a.m., she heard the voice again. Closer. Clearer. Eliza. I see you now. She shivered, backing away. But part of her, deep down, wanted to know more. She had to know what was under the floor. Chapter 2, The Trapdoor. Rain returned the following night, pounding the roof like footsteps. Eliza sat cross-legged on her bed with her flashlight off, eyes wide in the dark. She no longer pretended she was imagining things. Something was beneath her floor, and it knew her name. She didn't tell her parents again. They'd only offer weak smiles and soft denials. But she began watching the floor more carefully. There was something in the way the grain curved along that dark patch, like it was hiding a shape. Late Sunday afternoon, as gray light filtered through the curtains, Eliza pulled her rug aside and ran her hands along the wood. One board in the corner didn't match the rest. It was older, grayer, and slightly warped at the edges. And it had a seam. She pressed around it carefully, then hooked her fingers under the warped edge. It lifted, just slightly. Enough to show a rusted hinge. A trapdoor. Her stomach dropped. She stared at it for a long time, heart hammering. The edges were dusty, the wood dry. It hadn't been disturbed in years, or had it? She pushed it back into place and put the rug over it. Not tonight. That night, the voice returned, as if it had been waiting. You found me. Eliza squeezed her eyes shut. I can help you. The next day, she walked home from school in a haze. All she could think about was that trapdoor. It felt like it was calling to her now, even in daylight. Something tugged at her thoughts. She'd be staring out the window and suddenly feel her gaze drift to the floor. That night, her dreams were vivid. She stood in her room, except the walls were wet. The floor pulsed beneath her like skin. The trapdoor was open. From the darkness below rose a face, gaunt, hollow-eyed, its mouth stitched shut. Its eyes stared into hers with pleading. It reached for her with long, shaking fingers, and the stitches around its lips began to tear open, thread by thread. Eliza awoke with a gasp. Her sheets were damp with sweat. It was still night. The rain had stopped. But something else was happening. From under her bed came a sound. Tap. Then silence. Tap. Tap. It wasn't the floor. It was metal, like a nail tapping wood. She swung her legs off the bed, trembling. It stopped. She knelt down slowly, lifting the edge of her bedskirt. Nothing. But the dark patch of floor across the room, it looked different. The wood was slightly lifted, as if it had been disturbed. She crawled forward on hands and knees, breath held. The edge of the trapdoor was cracked open, just enough to reveal the black void beneath it. A single string, red and threadbare, dangled from the edge, tied in a perfect bow. Tuesday morning was cold and blue. Her father left for work early, her mother busy with boxes in the attic. Eliza opened the trapdoor all the way. A gust of freezing air blew up into her face. It smelled like damp stone and rust. Inside was a wooden ladder, old and slick with moss. It led down into utter blackness. The shaft was tight, maybe 5 feet across. Far below, something moved. She heard it again. The voice. Not in her ears, in her bones. Eliza, so close now. She slammed the trapdoor shut and threw herself back against it, panting. The wood was cold beneath her palms. She waited. Nothing came. That afternoon, her mother asked her to run a box up to the attic. Eliza hesitated. The attic felt wrong too, though not in the same way. She climbed the stairs slowly, the old wood groaning beneath her. The attic was dim and musty. Old furniture draped in white sheets stood like ghosts. She set the box near the far wall, where a round attic window let in pale light. Something flickered in the glass. Eliza turned. Behind her was a mirror, cracked and freckled with age. But in its reflection, her room appeared. Not the attic. Her room. And the trapdoor was open. Someone was climbing out. She spun around. The attic was empty. When she looked back at the mirror, the image was gone. That night, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Her parents were already in bed. She checked the clock, 1:03 a.m. She held her breath. The steps were slow. 1, 2, 3. Then silence. Something stopped right outside her door. She couldn't breathe. Then, a knock. 3 soft knocks. She didn't move. Didn't speak. After a moment, the footsteps began again, moving away this time, down the stairs. The house settled into silence once more. In the morning, she found 3 long scratches on her door. Deep ones. And the rug was pushed aside. The trapdoor was open again. Chapter 3, The Hollow Below. The third time Eliza opened the trapdoor, she was fully awake. There was no dream, no haze, no sleepwalking excuse. She knelt on the floor in her hoodie and socks, hand resting on the old wood, trying to understand why her fingers didn't tremble. Something had changed. She was still afraid, terrified, but it was different now. Like her fear was turning inside out. Like it had fused with curiosity. She lifted the door again. Slowly. Cold air met her like breath from a tomb. The wooden ladder disappeared into shadow. She listened, but the dark was quiet tonight. No whispers, no tapping. No voice. She considered calling for her parents. But what would she say? "Hey, Mom, Dad, there's a haunted ladder in my floor." They'd smile and talk about moving stress. Her mom might call a therapist. Her dad might yank the ladder out and board up the hole. But Eliza didn't want it boarded. She wanted to know what was below. She slipped her leg over the side and placed her foot on the top rung. It held. The ladder creaked softly as she began to descend. The cold thickened the farther she went. The light from her room faded above her like a dying candle. 10 rungs. 15. 20. She lost count. Then her foot touched solid ground. She had entered a room. It was larger than she expected. The walls were stone and curved slightly inward, forming a dome. The floor was earth, damp and soft. A single bulb dangled from the ceiling, flickering faintly, swinging even though there was no breeze. Along the far wall stood a mirror, tall, antique, cracked. And in that mirror, Eliza saw herself. But not just herself. Behind her, in the reflection, stood a figure. She turned fast. Nothing. Back to the mirror. The figure was gone. She backed away slowly, but something caught her foot. She looked down. A small object sat in the dirt near the base of the ladder. A child's shoe, old-fashioned, scuffed and dusty, barely a size 4. She knelt to pick it up. Underneath it, carved into the ground, was a name. Clara. Eliza barely slept that night. When she did, her dreams were thick and heavy like mud. A girl in a gray dress stood beside her bed, lips sewn shut, eyes dark and infinite. When Eliza woke, her throat ached. She stumbled to the mirror in the bathroom and opened her mouth to look. Thread. A single black thread lay at the back of her throat like a hair. She gagged it up, coughing hard until it dropped into the sink. It was thick, oily, and coiled. She flushed it, shaking. At school, she found herself watching the floor. Wondering what rooms lay under the world. What things lived in hollow spaces no one remembered. At lunch, she pulled out her notebook. On a blank page, she wrote. Who is Clara? What is under the house? Why me? She added a fourth question before closing the book. Why do I want to go back? That night, she returned. Down the ladder again. Rung by rung. Into the cold. The bulb was off this time, but she brought her flashlight. The room looked the same. Stone, earth, silence. She stepped carefully toward the far wall. Toward the mirror. It was clearer tonight. Her reflection stared back. Pale, anxious. Then, behind her, the reflection changed. The door at the top of the ladder was open. Something stood above it, silhouetted. Long arms. Crooked posture. It began to descend. She spun and pointed her flashlight at the ladder. Nothing. But the trapdoor above was now open. She hadn't left it that way. She didn't sleep. She sat in her bed until morning, waiting for movement, for a voice, for the sound of breath under the floor. None came. But when she pulled the rug aside again after breakfast, something was different. A small handprint had formed on the wood above the trapdoor. It was smeared with red dirt. Next to it were 2 words, written in the dust. Come back. Chapter 4, Clara's Room. Eliza didn't tell anyone she was going back. She waited until after dinner, after her parents were distracted with dishes and TV, then slipped upstairs. Her heart thudded like a war drum. She hadn't made a plan, just a decision. Tonight, she needed answers. The trapdoor creaked open with less resistance than before. As if the house itself was getting used to her. She stared down into the dark shaft, gripping the flashlight tighter. The cold rose again to greet her, familiar now, less sharp. 1 foot after the other, she descended. When she reached the bottom, she was ready to run. But the room was quiet, calm, almost. The bulb above her head buzzed softly and stayed on this time, casting a weak glow over the stone walls and packed dirt. The mirror was still there, cracked but steady. And tonight, it reflected something new. A hallway. Eliza stepped toward it slowly. Her boots crunched on gravel. She hadn't noticed it before, but the floor wasn't all dirt. There were bones in it, small ones, pale and delicate, like bird wings or fingers. She didn't stop. She reached the far wall where the mirror stood and hesitated. In the reflection, the hallway beyond flickered, like an old film reel. It shouldn't be there. Behind the mirror was only stone. But in the glass, she saw flickering candlelight and a narrow corridor. She reached out. Her fingers touched glass, and then passed through it. The mirror rippled like water. She gasped and yanked her hand back. It was dry, but her fingertips tingled. She turned around. Nothing had changed. The ladder behind her remained, the stone walls solid. Then the whisper came again. "Don't be afraid." Eliza didn't speak. She stepped forward and pushed her hand back through the mirror. Then her arm. Then her head. She stepped through. The air was thick and heavy on the other side, warmer than expected, and full of dust. She stood in a stone hallway, walls crumbling and lined with crooked picture frames. The candles flickering on the wall sconces cast dancing shadows across old portraits of girls in black dresses and tight smiles. She walked carefully. The floor groaned beneath her. Far ahead, a door waited, painted white, its knob rusted. She reached it and touched the handle. It turned. The door opened. Inside was a small bedroom. A child's room. The walls were pink once, now gray with time. A toy chest sat in the corner, slightly ajar. A cracked doll lay on the bed, its porcelain face smashed. The sheets were faded and blood-speckled. In the center of the room sat a figure. A girl. She faced away, her gray dress bunched around her knees. Her hair was dark and stringy. Her arms rested limply at her sides. Eliza's breath caught. "Clara?" The girl didn't move. Eliza stepped forward. The mirror from earlier was mounted on the far wall, framed in silver. In it, Eliza could see herself, and Clara, sitting still. But in the reflection, Clara was looking back. Eyes wide. Lips trembling. Mouth still stitched shut. Eliza gasped and turned. The real Clara hadn't moved. But her reflection was staring directly at Eliza. Eliza stepped closer to the girl and crouched. Are you the one calling me?" Clara raised her head slowly. Her stitched mouth quivered. Then she nodded. Tears ran silently down her cheeks. Eliza's hand trembled. "Who did this to you?" Clara looked up. In the mirror, something moved behind them both. A shape, tall, narrow, with no face. Its arms hung too long. Its head tilted at an unnatural angle. Clara opened her mouth, thread stretching. Behind Eliza, the air turned cold. "Run," Clara mouthed. Eliza spun around. Nothing. But a whisper slithered past her ear. "You don't belong here." She bolted. Back down the hall. Past the flickering portraits, now twisted and smiling. The floor warped beneath her feet. The mirror entrance loomed ahead. She dove through it like ice water. Back in the stone room. She gasped and stumbled, heart racing. The bulb overhead flickered madly. She turned back toward the mirror. It was solid now. Clara stood behind the glass. She raised one hand, and placed it against the mirror. Her stitches were gone. But her eyes were full of terror. The last thing Eliza saw was the shadow behind Clara, taller than the doorway, reaching slowly for her. Then the bulb exploded above Eliza's head. Darkness. She scrambled for the ladder and didn't stop until her knees hit her bedroom floor. She slammed the trapdoor and threw the rug back over it. She sat with her back against the wall, staring. The room was silent. But the mirror in her closet. She hadn't noticed it before tonight. In it, her reflection stood perfectly still. But her mouth was sewn shut.